Hi, today we're going to look at 3 more psychedelic records from 1968. So stick around. First up, In Search of the Lost Chord by the Moody Blues. Check out that album cover. Is that a psychedelic album cover or what? But wait. Check out the gatefold. Plenty more psychedelia there. Now this is the 3rd album from the Moody Blues, and you probably know the hit song off this album. It's called Ride My Seesaw. Now it's played quite a bit on classic rock radio, even to this day. However, it never did break through the Billboard Top 200. The album did. The album made it all the way up to number 23. But the single never quite hit. Now, the Moody Blues are a real interesting band. Their previous album was called In Days of Future Past, which actually was recorded with the London Festival Orchestra, and it kind of set the tone and established them as kind of a prog rock, psychedelic rock combination. On this album, the band, I think, took it even more, and it became a truly psychedelic album. They experimented with different instruments. Not only did they use normal instruments, or somewhat normal instruments, like the flute, the oboe, the cello, and of course, any psychedelic record has to have the sitar, but they also used some different instruments that I had no idea what they even were. I had to look them up on the internet. First, we had the tambura, then the tabla, and the mellotron. I had no idea what these were. Anyhow, they utilized all this to create this concept album. The album is about quest and discovery, and it really should be played straight through, side A all the way through, flip it over, play side B all the way through. Now, preferably, the best way to listen to this, I gotta say, is with an old-fashioned pair of headphones like this, where you actually put them on and you plug them into the stereo. Now, you probably have to have some kind of an adapter pin to go from the large to the small pin, but if you have these kind of old headphones, get them out. It's amazing what you hear. The vocals, especially on this album, kind of float above everything. And if you turn off, my psychedelic test, if you turn off all the lights, turn up the tunes, and just let your mind take you where it goes, you're going to love this album. Next up is the 3rd album by The Doors called Waiting for the Sun. Now this album, like I said, is the 3rd album by The Doors. The first 2 albums were out there. They were using Jim Morrison's poetry, but by the time for the 3rd album comes up, they were a little bit at a loss. Jim's drinking was extremely bad. And he was actually ready to quit the band until the band talked him into staying for 6 more months. Now, when you open up this album, the gatefold has the Celebration of the Lizard. Originally planned for the Celebration of the Lizard to take up one whole side of the album, but that didn't go over so well with the record company. They did use a Not to Touch the Earth section of the poem in the song To Not Touch the Earth. This is where Jim Morrison first sings, "I am the Lizard King, I can do anything." Eventually that song shows up in its full force in 1969 on their 5th album, Absolutely Live. Now this album does contain the big hit, Hello, I Love You. However, the real star of the show, I believe, is a song called The Unknown Soldier. The song is almost like it's kind of like a movie, almost cinematic, I would say, where it has sounds of a drill sergeant, troops marching, military drums, the loading of rifles, and the song actually ends with a depiction of how the Vietnam War was shown on television to the American public. Very political statement. Now this is a very psychedelic album, and it's, like I said, it's not my favorite Doors album. However, it is a great piece of history, and if you're a Doors fan, you definitely want to listen to it. If you're searching for new psychedelia, there's better albums. Next up is The Electric Flag, and the album is called A Long Time Coming. Now, this is a cool album. If you look at the back, take a look at the band. I don't know if you can see it, but the band includes a young drummer named Buddy Miles at 19 years old. Anyhow, we'll get back to Buddy Miles. So, this is kind of a different kind of psychedelic record. The band was pretty much started when Mike Bloomfield left the Paul Butterfield Blues Band back in 1967. His goal was to create a band that combined the sounds of rock, soul, jazz, and psychedelia. One of the other founding members of the band, like I previously mentioned, was Buddy Miles. He was a young 19-year-old kid, and he would later go on to be one of the stars of Jimi Hendrix's Band of Gypsies. Amazing drummer. Anyhow, before this first record was released, the band actually was approached to record the soundtrack to a 1967 drug exploitation film. The film was called The Trip. It was about an LSD experience by Peter Fonda, written by Jack Nicholson. So before they even put together an album, they had recorded this soundtrack and earned their chops as a psychedelic band. Now, this album is real interesting in the way they incorporate horns into the music. Now, this was before Chicago or Blood, Sweat, and Tears, and this was actually kind of groundbreaking. The album explores soul, jazz, blues, and just a hint of psychedelia. Would I call it a 100% psychedelic album? Maybe not, but it's definitely a fun album and worth listening to. So that concludes our 3 psychedelic records from 1968, Part 3. If you have favorites that you'd like us to explore, please go ahead and list them down below. I do try to respond to all comments.
Whoa.